Going Inside is a podcast on a mission to help people heal from trauma and reconnect with their authentic self. Join me, trauma therapist John Clarke, for guest interviews, real-life therapy sessions, and soothing guided meditations. Whether you're navigating your own trauma, helping others heal from trauma, or simply yearning for a deeper understanding of yourself, Going Inside is your companion on the path to healing and self-discovery. Download free guided meditations and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. My guest today is Marina Shriner. Marina is a renowned somatic coach and has supported thousands to move through stuckness, unleash their power, and step into unprecedented visionary success in their relationships, careers, and life through profoundly transformative body-based approaches that go to the deep roots, addressing triggers, emotional healing, and nervous system regulation. She has mentored thousands of clients through her coaching, online courses, and live programs. Marina, thank you so much for being here. What else should people know about who you are and how you got here?
Oh, thank you for having me, first of all. I'm very
Mhm.
much looking forward to it. How I got here through my own journey, right? I think many of us do, through a lot of childhood trauma. And yeah, beyond like family and childhood trauma, there was immigration and war and a lot of those stories in my life, and just really being in my head and circling around in my head and trying to analyze everything to understand instead of like being in my body, which I didn't even know was a concept. So when that came about, it really changed my life, and I wanted to teach other people.
Mm, that's a good summary, which is probably a million little ripples in there. But so did you immigrate to the US from somewhere?
Yes. Interestingly, for this moment, I was born in Ukraine, and then when I was 2, we moved to Israel, and when I was 12, we moved to the States, and then I was kinda, like, back and forth, Israel and the States, and now I'm in Costa Rica and the States.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, a lot of us come to this work by way of our own healing journeys. So that's, yeah, a common story, and our healing informs how we help clients, right? I'm so curious in your journey, what have you found that has worked? What have you found that hasn't worked?
Hmm. You know, I would say everything worked for the right time, like, everything showed up in the right time. So, when I was in high school, I don't know why. I was always, like, very interested in therapy, and I would say to my parents that I wanna go to therapy, but they're like, "There's nothing wrong with you. Why would you go to therapy?" It's a very USSR, like, mindset, and, I ended up going to therapy when I was 18 in college because it was free, and that was talk therapy, but we did so, I could say that now I never engage in anything that doesn't have a somatic component because I know that works the best for me,
Mhm.
and that's what I really need. But back then, it was exactly what I needed. I think if if I had someone tell me to go into my body, I would freak out. So somatics, parts work, and you actually have had my own therapist on your podcast who recommended me, and she's the best. And
Oh,
we
okay.
mhm, and we do, parts work together and attachment stuff. That's yeah, and inner child work that has been the most influential for me, I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. Um, and yeah, tell me more about how you became a practitioner and started helping clients.
So, when I was a teenager, I participated in a dialogue program between Israelis and Palestinians. And that kind of blew my mind and opened my world to that topic. And really, I think at the heart of it, it's trauma. I mean, the whole conflict. And meeting Palestinians for the first time, like hearing their narrative, sharing mine, sharing narratives and seeing how differently we see things. That was very fascinating. And so when I was 22, I moved back to Jerusalem to do my master's degree. And I took a 2-year conflict transformation facilitation program, and then I became a facilitator and I worked for 10 years in facilitating dialogue. And I probably wouldn't use those words back then of trauma. Like, basically, we were kind of doing group therapy without being properly trained for it, but it was so fascinating.
Mm,
And I always wanted to do that kind of work, but less intensely maybe because it was, very concentrated kind of, work was challenging, but I just loved it. I thrived on it. And so then I started a business in actually health coaching because I changed my own diet and I wanted to share that. I started eating plant-based and wanted to teach that. And I felt very, very stuck in that business as a health coach. And I knew like what I wanted and where I wanted to go. I had big goals and dreams, but it felt very stuck. And that's actually where the trauma for me came up most concretely in my life because I had this goal. It was very clear and just couldn't get there. And when another coach introduced this concept to me that I'm having a trauma response in my business, that was so confusing because I was like, well, I've never had a business before. How could I be having business trauma? And so that's where I got to learn that trauma responses have nothing to do with the actual events or the circumstances. It's more about what's happening in your body. So all of the attachment stuff, like growing up in my family, the way that I did, all of that came up to the surface, and I just felt awful. Like every time I would be rejected, for example, I'd spend days in bed. And so I was like, is there such a thing as therapy in the body? Like I had no idea that it existed at that time. And then one therapist referred me to another, and I ended up doing somatic experiencing for 3 years. And so much came up there. And then I would ask my therapist, can I do this with clients? And she would say, this, yes, this, no, you need more training, whatever. And so I started getting not somatic experiencing, but somatic training of different kinds and, started working in that with clients. That's what I was always meant to do.
I want to introduce you to our sponsor for today, Jane, a clinic management software and EMR that helps you handle your clinic's daily admin tasks so you can free up your evenings and weekends. The Jane team understands how precious your time is and recognizes that charting can often be the most time-consuming task for practitioners. That's why they're here to help. To save you from having to start your chart notes from scratch, you can check out Jane's template library, which gives you access to templates that have been generously created and shared by health and wellness practitioners in the community. Once you have a template you like, you can choose to customize it further with charting tools such as range scales, text fields, checkboxes, and more. To see how Jane can help you spend more time doing what you love, head to the link in the show notes to book a personalized demo. Or if you're ready to get started, you can use the code JOHN at the time of sign up for a 1 month grace period applied to your new account. If you're open, I'd love to hear more about how you found that trauma was showing up in your business.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The experience of rejection, what just completely, I mean, just blew me away. Like it wasn't like, "Oh, okay, someone said no and then someone else will say yes and it's okay." It just was so extreme
Yeah.
in my body, like there was such a shutdown, and I didn't know that I lived my life dissociated actually. Like I had no idea because when you're dissociated, you don't feel anything from the neck down. It just feels normal, like, this is how I live,
Yeah.
and then suddenly I started to see, like, I actually feel nothing most of the
Yeah.
time, which was a protective, unconscious, obviously, strategy, but the rejection stuff would bring the dissociation just couldn't help me out there, just everything would flood me, and then I would become really activated and in fight or flight, and then I would just go into shutdown and freeze for days, and it was just these cycles over and over again. It's like, I can't catch a break, and why is this happening? Why is it so extreme? Like, why when you think about it, someone says no, okay, I mean, that happens in business all
Yeah.
the time. So that was kind of the portal into seeing like, "Oh, I need to look at this because I'm
Mhm.
having an overreaction." So it's such a big trigger for me. And that connects to so many things in my childhood. I mean, from like in those times, I think now I'm deeper into understanding more about childhood trauma, CPTSD, but I was diagnosed with PTSD from sexual assault from my first relationship. So to me, that was the thing that I would focus on, and I think over
Yeah.
the years, I saw, like, deeper layers that like, what was the childhood blueprint that even drew me to an abusive relationship?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much in that too of, repeating patterns that are rooted in our wounding. It's kind of a classic
Absolutely.
story, and
Yes.
sometimes we can almost see ourselves doing that and also not being able to stop it or change it or escape that, cycle, you know, and ending up in that familiar pattern over and over again until we do the deeper healing and then can break the pattern or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes it's even hard to see it because
Yeah.
I grew up with a narcissistic father and there was a lot of confusion. Like there was a lot of blaming me to not trigger him. That was a big messaging in my family from all the women. So that's what I learned to do. Like don't get small. Don't trigger the man or even friends. And so I couldn't see that actually. That pattern took many, actually until the end of my marriage and getting divorced that I could finally see, oh, that's what I do, exactly like my mom and my grandma, the same cycle. But I actually couldn't even see that for a very long time.
Mhm. Yeah. Mm. You mentioned, some of the sticking points that would come up in business as well, and something I think of was, like, things feel really high stakes or they feel more high stakes than they are, right? Like, a potential client saying no or a potential client leaving or whatever it is, it can feel like a lot more than it actually is. And the reality is, like, we're seeing everything through our own, parts and our own lenses, and often distorting that into something else, a narrative that aligns with our core wounding. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But being in business can bring up a lot of that stuff because you're it's just you and you're exposed to these types of moments and risk and putting yourself out there and vulnerabilities, perhaps more so than when you're working for a company or in a container. It can come up anywhere really, but especially when you're self-employed, it can feel like you're really fully exposed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I kind of have a history of, for better or for worse, like putting myself in situations that bring things up to be exposed in that way. And I think, yeah, I think you're right. It can come up anywhere. I mean, we can be rejected in corporate, right? Or in a 9 to 5. But I think there's something about business that's, like, so vulnerable because you're especially my way of running my business, it's me, like, I put myself out there, so it just feels very intimate, kind of like how our most intimate relationships bring up our greatest wounds and our triggers, it's the same thing. I really put myself out there and I share like, I teach by sharing, like, how I'm doing now my own story. And I think that's what impacts people the most, but it's also very, very vulnerable and brings up stuff for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. Why why is working with the body so important, and how has it been important for your journey?
Mm, yeah. Trauma is stored in our bodies. So much of it is. Of course, it also impacts our belief systems and our thoughts. And when I started to try to work through things in my business, I focused on the mind. I tried to see how can I change my thought pattern or with affirmations and meditation and all these things, which I don't think are bad. But when someone has trauma, it is wired into their body and it's expressed through sensations and emotions. And if we just work with thoughts, we're only covering like 20% of actual change. And that's why I kept getting stuck. And when, many people know that over 90% of what we do, like our daily behavior, is unconscious. And so, where is the unconscious? It's in the body. Literally, that's where it lives. And so, that wiring can be shifted through our body and in somatic experiencing, it was about suppressing the survival energy that hasn't been digested. So if you're under threat, if you're going through, and this can be, a lion chasing you or a burglar or an emotional threat, feeling unsafe, there is our natural instinct is to try to survive. So we either fight or flee. When we're not able to do that, and again, like, my interest honestly in my work is much more about repetitive trauma, relational trauma that is more emotional rather than, like, acute, like, a car accident. That's not really something I feel super great at working with. I just, from my own experience, like, the repetitive emotional abuse or neglect as well, it's very traumatic. And so when we feel, and as little kids, like, we don't feel that we can escape it because it's from our parents, the very people who are supposed to keep us safe, and it's very, very subtle. And many of us don't realize, like, clients who come to me that just feel stuck, like, they feel stuck in their career, they feel stuck in their relationship, they don't understand, like, this doesn't make any sense. Why? I had a fine childhood. And then we really look at it and we see that it wasn't. And then you're not able to leave for whatever reason or to fight it because you're a child and you're very vulnerable. And as a child, you're even more vulnerable to it than as an adult because, of course, you don't have that power of choice, the power of agency, all these things. That energy that is a natural response gets trapped in the body because it would come up and then it's not getting expressed literally, like, we're not running, we're not hiding, then we go into freeze. Which is, according to polyvagal theory, there is a hierarchy, meaning like a sequence of events that is naturally unfolding in the body. The lion comes, we're trying to fight or flee. When we can't, then we freeze, kind of play dead, which is survival. Like, it's very helpful. But as adults, then all of that gets trapped. So the responses are basically you're responding from a 5-year-old or from a 10-year-old when you're triggered. And when you have childhood trauma, it gets triggered even more. And yeah, it's really tricky to work with. But when you're working with the body, that's the source. That's really where all of those responses are trapped. And so when you work through them with energetically, meaning, like, literally, okay, now imagine yourself running away or leaving and, like, allowing the energy to play out. But then there's the emotional part. Do you have grief here? Do you have rage here? That's how the body learns. You can't tell the body, oh, but it's done. That experience is over. The body still feels, and the body believes that it's not over. So you have to play it out. And then when with a safe person, I find that very, very important. And then when that's over, then you can feel like, oh, okay, now I'm not going to respond in my life from the 5-year-old state because I'm actually, that part of me has been integrated.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. The body needs to complete its response, and when the thing is happening, we're unable to complete that response or to really consolidate and make sense of the memories that are being formed in that moment and the story that is surrounding the whole thing. And so, yeah, I started the SE practitioner program a couple years ago, and I'm still somewhere in it. Um, and so much of it is, yeah, allowing for the rest of that response to happen in a slow, steady, titrated way. Um, the body knows what to do. It's just it couldn't fully do it there at that time. Yeah.
Exactly. And the emotional part is the most interesting to me because I'm very highly sensitive, and all of my clients are too. Sometimes they don't recognize it, but they realize it in the process. And it's even more important for us. Like, it's very, very traumatic for us if we don't have caregivers who actually provide space for that. So I think for the average person that is not highly sensitive, it's of course important for everybody. But for us, it's even more important. It's like an even more important need because of course every child has kind of different needs. And when we don't get to have a safe space to feel our emotions, the messaging is like, "You're too much," or "You're not enough," and shut down everything, shut down the feelings. So we either disconnect from the feelings or we just totally merge with them, and then they take over everything. Like, we're not able to just be present and have a safe relationship with our emotions, which is something I had to learn, and I'm probably forever going to keep practicing. Like, it's not perfect, it's very tricky, and it's so interesting, I think, when I meet people. I've met so many people who have done a lot of work, but not that work. Like, they haven't worked with their emotions, and you can really tell, like, there's so many kind of behaviors that are,
Yeah.
yeah, really fascinating
Well,
to
they've
notice.
kind of worked around it and done a lot of work that's kind of adjacent to that piece, but we do a lot of demonizing our feelings and habituating around running from them or not feeling them. Or, I was talking to a group last night around the experience of being a man and repressing our feelings and not feeling them, to the point where a guy who was sharing said, "Well, I eventually had a heart attack," right? Which is like
Mm.
the ultimate shutdown. And just so much, we'll just go to great lengths to not feel our feelings, and then part of how the therapy can help is touching into that pain a little bit at a time in a way that's not super overwhelming and gives people the sense that I actually can do it and my feelings have utility, or there's a reason to feel them and let them move through me. Um, but also there's fears around like getting stuck there for too long, or it'll overwhelm me or whatever. And to your point, like at some point it was very much not safe to feel your feelings or to show it or whatever. So there's like an incredible amount of masking that goes on all the time. Or even like my clients who work for big companies and like having to white knuckle it through a meeting where they're on the verge of a panic attack or they're being shamed by their boss or whatever, and just have to go, yeah, yeah, don't worry, I'll get right on it, no problem. There's so much of that kind of self-abandoning that we have to do to just get through life. And then it's like, well, where does that energy go? It's like grief. I think about grief. It's like that's like stuck energy, and where does that energy go if we don't metabolize it? Talk therapy isn't always enough, and as therapists, we can feel that in the room. You see your clients stuck in cycles of anxiety, shame, and trauma, and despite your training, something is still missing. That's where internal family systems therapy comes in. My name is John Clarke, trauma therapist and IFS practitioner, and I'm hosting a free webinar just for therapists and practitioners to show you how IFS can transform both your personal healing and your client work. We're going to explore how IFS actually helps clients heal at the root, the 8 qualities of self and why they matter in therapy, and a simple tool you can start using right away. No certification required. If you're ready to go deeper in your work and stop carrying the emotional weight alone, this is for you. Join us now. It's free. Link in the description.
Grief is the theme of my year. Um, and I mean, I'm just observing that so many people are in that this year. It's
Yes.
very interesting. I think it's like collective. I mean, like all my 3 countries are dealing with that and more countries obviously in the world, but big conflicts in
Yeah.
my, 3 countries of origin.
Yeah.
And so collective and individual. It's yeah, yeah. And we have to, and we can't do it in big chunks because that's where we then go into the
Hmm.
freeze state. Like we
Yeah.
have to,
Collapse.
like you said, yeah, the titration and just doing it in manageable pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. Noticing the breath there. E- Again, I just like something I love about working somatically is we don't have to kind of make sense of the grief or pick it apart or analyze it. But a lot of clients come at this from this top-down approach of like, I'm here to kind of figure stuff out or like decode my grief or my trauma or whatever. Whereas so much of it instead, and what I invite them to do is it's more about being with it all, being with the part of you that was hurt and wounded and back there and abused, and the part of you that's perfectionistic, and the part of you that's holding on to the grief, and the part that fears that the grief would be too much if I actually tapped into it today, right? And if you can just be with all of that, then it helps you move through it and get into the kind of stream of life again, which is full of grief and pain and joy and happiness and all these things, right? Like I had a client yesterday who was very much in fear for most of the session, and then had at the end kind of had this like fear about not being able to feel joy. Whereas even just a few moments ago, they were feeling joy when talking about their family. And so we had that touch point like right there. Like it literally just happened. And can you hold the in this moment or in this session, you felt fear and joy back to back. Both of those things are in there and they're fleeting and they're, you know, neither of them are forever. But there's always this fear that like my pain is the painful feelings are going to be forever, right? Or if I go there, it's going to kind of like give it more space, or I'm going to get stuck there versus really metabolizing what's already there and what needs to be felt, and honoring that life is scary and painful and there's loss everywhere. And we either like feel that and move through it, or it kind of follows us around like this monkey on your back, or the body, takes it on, right? And it creates disease and illness and all that. But you know, growing up in the Western world, like, we don't really want to see it that way. We
Yeah,
still have a very long
absolutely.
way to go. So
Yeah.
it would sound a little crazy if you pitch that to a medical doctor.
Some, yeah, some are I agree with you, some don't see it at all, and some are kind of seeing it. I think, one of the most helpful concepts in SE is having enough resource or enough
Yeah,
safety, and I think what gets compounded by childhood trauma is that the invalidation. There's a lot of invalidation that we
yeah,
experience in very subtle ways and also bigger ways, I think, with childhood trauma. And so, even when a lot of crazy things happen, like I think validating, oh, I'm actually supposed to feel really crappy right now. Like that's actually kind of
yeah,
normal.
yeah,
That's really hard to do when you've heard a message that you're bad, you're wrong, you did this
yeah,
bad, you did, and so you're used to kind of doing that with yourself, and that takes away safety and resource that lets you be with the emotion. So that's like
yeah.
an added layer of challenge there.
Well, we're obsessed with control. We're obsessed with controlling things, and this sentiment culturally that we should be in control all the time, or like a competent, successful person is in control all the time. And so it's like even like having self-control, quote unquote, or control of your emotions is just a weird kind of backwards concept, right? Versus again, someone who can fluidly move through their feelings and feel them and be with them and then decide how to respond, right? Like you're mentioning the business stuff, right? Like if a client leaves, you might feel some not enoughness or some grief or confusion or sadness. And the more you can be with that and feel it and let it move through you and honor that that's in there because you're human, the sooner you can decide how you want to respond to that. Or honor the both and, which is like you might be both sad that the client's leaving and you totally get it and you're happy for them in their next thing. And you can honor both of those and say it out loud. And the more you honor and just validate your own system like that, it's like, keeping your shadow out in front of you. It's like, of course, my first IFS mentor, Derek Scott, it's just like, of course I'm feeling these things. Of course there's a part of me that's sad that you're leaving, you know. Of course I'm, have parts that feel rejected or whatever. Um, and the sooner you do that, the sooner it just kind of softens. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said about, like, how we can have access to decision making so much better when we just let the emotions flow. And it's much easier said than done. I mean, I find
Yeah.
myself constantly still struggling with that, and also feeling exhausted by many, many emotions, or a lot of
Mhm.
grief. It's very exhausting. And then finding like, oh, but if I have a big cry, for example, then I feel so much better, and I feel like that resistance is gone. I can, move through things. I can make decisions. Yeah, but that still arises, that resistance to like, oh, I can't, or it's draining. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like which one requires the less energy to kind of like fight it or control it or to be with it and to kind of let it move through you, right? Or kind of redirect that energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I know that yeah, with the time we have left, um we also talked about how this shows up in relationships, like our adult relationships or let's say romantic relationships, especially in the vein of like the parts of us that want to rescue or fix or whatever. So yeah, what else comes to mind around that?
Yeah, the moment that you said control, that really came up for me because,
Mhm.
um one of my mechanisms as a kid was to be very hyper vigilantly
Mhm.
observant of what everybody was feeling, and then doing what I can to make them not feel that, to prevent my dad from exploding, to prevent my mom from being overwhelmed. So, fixing and rescuing, I think it's very common for practitioners as
Mhm.
on our in our human life, because that's kind of like we can channel that energy into our work, which is great in a way. Like, of course, if we're
That's how a
like,
lot of us got here is that fixer, rescuer, mediator part. Yeah.
exactly. And of course, that can also be toxic even in our work. It can. I think many of us do a good job with it, like kind of trusting that our clients will get there and just supporting them, because there's like a shadow side and a light side to it. So it's beautiful in like being able to see people and really feel with them and feel them and all these kinds of things. But then when we get into fixing, rescuing, helping without being asked, we can call in some very, very challenging people into our life. People who want to be fixed, people who want to be fixed are people that have a lot of struggles, and that's kind of what we invite in. And that has been a huge pattern of mine.
Yeah. Well, part of the narrative that happens underneath that is like someone is upset, I should do something about it. Right?
Hmm.
And maybe at some
Hmm.
point it was mom or dad or whomever, but now it's a partner or a friend or a coworker or whatever. And there's this part of us that goes, I can't stand that this person is upset or sad, or I can just feel their anxiety. So I should do something about it. Right. It's like maybe, but a lot of how we get, how we stumble through this is like sticking our hand into stuff that's not really ours or like again, even this piece around just like being with someone, it's like, do you want me to be with you in your grief or your stress or whatever without taking it on as my own? But we lose our separateness very quickly because at some point for your survival, it was essential to blend and merge with that person. So that's the only way you know how to relate. And that's the only way you know how to like get love and connection and closeness is to do that, which basically like self-abandon, you know? And if that hooks into the other person's core wounding, it's like you're a perfect match.
Yep.
Bonded by your trauma. Perfect
There you
quotes.
go.
But,
Yeah,
you know,
so it's also fun. It's a
yeah,
very yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Well,
think you
it's so
explained it
familiar.
so well. Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I think also when we have emotionally mature parents, which was my case, and so many people, I love Dr. Lindsay Gibson's work on it. She has a very, popular book on children of emotionally mature parents.
Oh,
Um that is where, your parents didn't know how to handle their overwhelm or their rage or their sadness. And so that for a child is very overwhelming and
yeah,
unsafe, like scary.
yeah.
If rage is getting unleashed on them or overwhelm or whatever, they have to find a strategy unconsciously to work through that, to be with that, especially if it's consistent. So sometimes, for some people, it's like a period of time or like just a few incidents. That's bad too. But then if it's like a consistent thing and the parent never works on their stuff, and I think this has been a huge pattern for me is like encountering people who haven't worked on their stuff, like my parents, and being the one to guide them or teach them or, become responsible for their well-being, where that's like you said, it's not our job. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's in charge of their journeys, and you can't fix anyone. It's not possible. And I think how we can recognize that it happens most clearly is the energy. So sometimes doesn't mean you shouldn't help anybody or support, of course, but what is the energy in your body? Is it like literally fight or flight? If I don't help this person, I'm going to die. Like that's kind of how it feels like, or something really bad is going to happen to me. Or is it like, oh, this is so, so lovely, like just being with this person and, being of support. It's very different
Yeah.
experience.
Well, a through line underneath a lot of this is like, in what ways am I too much for people? And this is just like kind of classic exile energy, um, that a lot of us hold. And if at some point you were too much for people like your caregivers, then that's in there somewhere, right? I've got big feelings and that's activating big feelings in my caregiver. And so as a result, they're shutting down or exiling my big feelings. And so I think, well, I must be bad for having them, right? Or I only get connection if I don't have big feelings. My big feelings are a problem for me, for others, you know. And then that's our template. That's kind of locked in until further notice, and we maneuver through life with that, until further notice, until deeper healing happens. But it just, I think a lot about the difference between empathy and compassion. And empathy is like feeling other stuff as if it's our own. And it's almost like your body doesn't know the difference, right? And empathy can really hurt versus compassion, which is like experiencing some resonance, but in your separateness from the other person. But again, for many of us, it can feel like that's breaking some sort of compact, like some sort of contract around taking others' stuff on as my own. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not of use to them,
Hmm.
or I don't really love them, or I'm not going to get love from them, whatever it is. But and therapists are no different, right? It just has a lot to do with our own exhaustion and burnout and codependence with clients. So if I really step back and go, um, my heart goes out to this person or this client, and I'm also like in my separateness, um, and trusting that they have what it takes deep inside to get where they're going in life, then it feels very different. And they can pick up on that too, right? I'm in an adult ego state, of course, interacting with them as in an adult ego state. It just feels different, right? And your self energy. But for so many of us, again, we go in even as therapists and practitioners with this fixer energy, right? And that instantly communicates that your client is broken, right?
Hmm.
Or this rescue energy, like, okay, so your client is lost, like fundamentally lost. And the power that like you maybe have the power to like save them, that you're this savior to begin with. So it's very, very confusing and very insidious. And we have to just be mindful of those pieces. And when when a client is either really activated and overwhelmed, what's that like for you? When a client is really hypoactive or depressed or withdrawn, what's that like for you? Usually one of those responses is extra activating for people.
Mhm.
Whether it's I've
Mm.
got to like get down in that hole with you or toss a rope and get you out of that, which is really more for the therapist than the client. Or if this person is really dysregulated, it's like, I got to regulate you, which is really for the practitioner's system, not necessarily for the clients, right? But it communicates like there's something wrong with being this way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love what you shared. I think I would add one more piece, which I don't relate to, but I think a lot of people do. It's either too much, which is the one I definitely relate to, because when I had big feelings, it's so interesting. I reminded my dad of his mom and it triggered him.
Yeah.
And he couldn't see that difference.
Yeah.
Because my grandmother is narcissistic, and she would use big feelings as a form of manipulation.
Yeah.
Versus me, I'm highly sensitive, so I have big feel like, this is just how I experience the world, so it was just like a form of truth, like, this is
Mhm.
what I'm feeling, not, like, to manipulate you, but that's
Yeah.
how he would take it, and that would really trigger him. So for me, I'm always watching still, like, this is still something I'm really working on. If I trigger someone. If I trigger someone, there's an immediate threat response in my body, and it
Mm.
feels very scary because he would get scary. So that's like one end of the spectrum. And then I think for a lot of people, they feel not enough. So then being the rescuer, of course, you're getting your sense of self-worth, which honestly, I don't really like that those terms self-worth, because what does that actually mean? To me, it means you're getting your safety. That's it. It's like, I'm going to be safe if this person is calm and if I'm needed. I'm constantly needed. And so I'm going to continue to do this so they don't leave me. That's, I think, a big piece of it too. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
really love how you shared that. And again, I think it comes back to um, what part of me, like you said, what part of me is actually showing up. And I wasn't trained in IFS. I like the concept of parts in general, and I really like the concept of just three simple parts, which is the adaptive child, the wounded child, and the wise adult. And the wise adult is, kind of clear. It's like self energy, I think, in IFS. It's just you're present, you're calm, you're connected to your body, you're connected to the other person, and even if you have a big feeling, you're still connected to yourself. You're
Yeah.
still present with it, so it doesn't take you over and it doesn't shut you down.
Yeah.
And then we have, the wounded child, I think is kind of like exile, maybe the same. The wounded child is really like the original wounding of like what we went through, that part of us. And then the adaptive is how basically we coped, how we're
Mm.
able to live in the world and what strategy. And so the fixer is that adaptive child. And when we're in that, we're literally, we're a practitioner who's 5 in that moment, right? Who's 5 years old. And you can feel that. That's why I really like somatics again, because feeling it is much more powerful to me than thinking about
Yeah.
it, because the thoughts vary. And of course, we have different thoughts corresponding to different parts too. But
Yeah.
I feel like you can really feel that in your body. You can ask like that part, how old are you right now? And it could be like, I'm 10, I'm 5, whatever.
Mhm.
So that's very, very clear. And then when you're in that, your job is to like show up for that first so that the wise adult can show up for the client or the friend or whatever, like whoever you're supporting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the way. Um, well, yeah, we're running out of time here, Marina, but yeah, I just want to thank you so much for doing this and being here and being so open about your story. Um, what else should people know about you in terms of how you help people, any current offerings, and then of course how they can learn more and get in touch with you?
When is this episode gonna be out? Do you know?
In the next like 2 weeks. So
Okay,
not this
cool,
coming Monday,
perfect.
but the following. Yeah.
That's
So
perfect. So I have a program on fixing actually, because as I think we've mentioned, it's quite a deep, broad, there's like so much in there.
Mhm.
Emotions, needs, feelings. I mean, so many parts of ourselves. So I created a group program. It starts end of October. It's called the Unburdened Heart.
Mm,
That's an offering I have going. I have one-on-one coaching and other things. I have a monthly community called Heart Space. So you can just check all of that out on either my website or my Instagram.
great. Awesome. We'll put links to all that in the description and show notes. And yeah, thank you so much again for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It was great.
All right. Thanks for listening to another episode of Going Inside. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and share your favorite episode with a friend. You can follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at John Clarke Therapy, and apply to work with me one-on-one at johnclarketherapy.com. See you next time.